February 24, 2022, a small factory outside Mississauga, Ontario. Inside, workers are finishing armored cash transit vans for bank companies. The phones start ringing before the morning shift is over. On the other side of the world, Russian tanks are crossing the Ukrainian border in the largest conventional land invasion Europe has seen in 80 years. The founder's wife is Ukrainian. She picks up the phone and asks one question: can we send these vehicles to Ukraine? Can we send them now? The factory had never built anything for a war. It had no combat pedigree, no NATO contract, no government defense relationship. Its most famous moment before that morning was delivering NASA astronauts to a SpaceX launch pad. Western analysts looked at what Roshel was producing and dismissed it. It was not a real MRAP. It was built on a commercial pickup truck chassis. Its armor was lighter than the German Dingo. Its factory was a workshop in Ontario, not a defense industrial complex. 4 years later, over 2,200 of those vehicles are deployed across Ukraine. They have survived direct drone strikes on the windscreen. They have driven back to friendly lines on 3 wheels after mine strikes. They have evacuated the wounded from Bakhmut, Pokrovsk, Vovchansk, and the Kursk incursion. They are the most numerous Western-built armored vehicle in Ukrainian service by a margin that no other manufacturer has come close to matching. The vehicle is called the Roshel Senator. Nobody outside the defense world had heard of it before the war. Ukraine named it the Roshelka, a family word, a diminutive, the kind of name soldiers give to something they trust with their lives. To understand why the Senator existed at all, you need to understand what Roman Shimonov built before the war, and why. Shimonov was born in the Soviet Union, raised in Israel, served in the Israeli ground forces, and emigrated to Canada. Before Roshel, he ran an encryption business. In 2016, he founded Roshel in the Greater Toronto area with a specific and unglamorous purpose: armored cash transit vans for Garda World and Brinks, VIP protection sedans, police vehicles. The company had 200 employees and a factory floor most Canadian defense officials had never visited. What Shimonov had built, without knowing it would matter, was a production system optimized for speed, not the speed of a military vehicle, the speed of making them. When the phone calls started in February 2022, Roshel did not redesign anything. It scaled what it already knew how to build, and it built faster than any Western defense contractor had managed since the Second World War. The vehicle itself is a masterpiece of deliberate compromise. The base is the Ford F550 Super Duty commercial chassis, 4-wheel drive, a 6.7-liter Power-Stroke turbo diesel V8, producing 330 horsepower, a 10-speed automatic transmission. This is a truck available in any rural hardware store across North America. That was the point. The armored crew capsule is a welded steel monocoque with a V-shaped hull for deflecting mine blasts. Gross vehicle weight, 88.45 kilograms. Length, 6 meters. Crew capacity, up to 10 soldiers, including driver and commander. Top speed, over 100 kilometers per hour on road. Operational range, 800 kilometers on a single tank. The vehicle is rated to Stanig 4569 Level 2 ballistic. It stops 7.62 by 39mm armor-piercing rounds at point-blank range. It is rated to survive an 8-kilogram TNT-equivalent anti-tank mine under any wheel or under the hull. It is rated to survive a 25-kilogram side blast charge. And it is rated against 155mm artillery fragmentation at 80 meters. Every component was chosen for a specific combat consequence. Run-flat tires with on-the-fly inflation meant a Senator could drive out of a mine strike on 3 wheels. The reinforced windscreen meant the vehicle could absorb a first-person view drone impact on the front glass without penetrating the crew. The 10-soldier capacity meant a full infantry fire team plus wounded could be extracted in a single trip. The commercial engine meant any Ukrainian mechanic with Ford training could fix it. The spare parts existed in every country on Earth. Within weeks of those first phone calls, Roshel had shipped its first 8 Senators to Ukraine under a Canadian government contract. Within 3 months, a sole-sourced $92 million Canadian contract for 200 vehicles had been signed. All 200 were delivered in under 90 days. No Western defense contractor had ever shipped 200 armored vehicles in 3 months. Not one. The vehicle that the analysts had dismissed was arriving at the front faster than anything the established manufacturers could produce. By December 2023, Roshel had delivered the 1,000th vehicle. By autumn 2024, it was 1,400. By March 2025, 1,700. By December 2025, over 2,000. By March 2026, over 2,200 confirmed deployed. The production rate was 120 to 140 vehicles every single month. 5 vehicles a day, out of a workshop in Ontario. The Bushmaster line in Bendigo could not match that rate. The German Dingo line could not come close. The American Max Pro surge production had long ended. Speed of delivery was worth more than any armor rating in a war that was consuming vehicles by the hundred every week. The unit that proved the senator beyond any reasonable doubt was the Heart Brigade, border guards operating around Vovchansk in Kharkiv Oblast, where some of the most intense fighting of the Russian 2024 Kharkiv offensive took place. A Heart Brigade driver using the call sign Sensei described the moment the vehicle proved itself. A Russian first-person view drone struck the senator's front windscreen during a patrol. Direct hit. The vehicle kept moving. The crew was unharmed. The reinforced glass held. In August 2024, Roshel released 46 seconds of footage filmed from inside a senator as a drone detonated against the hull. The camera shakes, smoke fills the cabin, then the passengers open the rear door and walk out. All of them. In June 2025, a video went across every Ukrainian military telegram channel simultaneously. A senator returning from a combat evacuation mission in Donetsk Oblast on the Pokrovsk axis had one of its wheels blown off by a mine. The vehicle kept moving on 3 wheels, on the tire pressure system alone, all the way back to the Ukrainian line. The wounded soldiers inside were delivered alive. Ukrainian soldiers had already given the vehicle its name by then, the Roshelka. Heart Brigade drivers told journalists it passes without problems even where ordinary pickup trucks get into trouble. One of those drivers had been a freight forwarder before the war. Another taught computer science. They said a week of training was enough to operate the vehicle in combat. Shock absorbers were easy to replace, spare parts existed. The critics were not wrong about the gaps, and honesty requires including them. Yuri Fedorenko, commander of the 92nd Brigade's Achilles drone unit, told CBC News in June 2024 that the Senator was not designed to drive off-road, that vehicles broke down frequently in muddy terrain, and that the platform was better suited to law enforcement than to heavy combat. The Dutch open-source tracker Oryx, through late 2025, documented 176 Senators destroyed, damaged, or captured against over 2,000 delivered. That is roughly 8 to 10%, a real combat cost, but a loss rate considered favorable for any Western vehicle exposed to Russian drone warfare in the most surveilled battlefield in the history of armed conflict. The vehicle was never designed to be invincible. It was designed to be numerous, fast to repair, and fast to replace. In a war defined by industrial attrition, that philosophy was worth more than heavier armor on a slower production line. On paper, every rival should have outperformed the Senator. The American Max Pro was heavier and combat-proven across Iraq and Afghanistan. The Australian Bushmaster had a reputation built in Helmand that preceded it to Ukraine. The German Dingo II carried heavier armor at Staneg Level 4. The Turkish Kirpi was mass-produced and cheaper to some customers. In practice, the Senator offered something none of them could provide in 2022 and 2023, delivery within weeks, at scale, continuously, at $600,000 per unit. That price was less than half the cost of some German alternatives. And because it rode on a Ford F550 chassis, a frontline mechanic could keep it running with parts ordered from a commercial supplier in any country that sold American trucks. That was worth more than any armor rating. In a war of logistics, the vehicle that can be fixed is the vehicle that wins. Russia placed Shimonov on a personal sanctions list in August 2022. He called it a badge of honor. By 2026, Roshel had stopped being a Canadian boutique manufacturer. The United States State Department had signed contracts worth $130 million for 330 vehicles destined for Ukraine. A joint venture had been signed in Prague with Omnipol in the presence of the Czech president. Moldova's police had taken delivery. Haiti's police were using senators against armed gangs. Brazil's Special Operations Police had ordered them. Bosnia had acquired them. A new 140,000-square-foot global headquarters had opened in Brampton, Ontario. A 40,000-square-foot plant had opened in Michigan. A 2 million-square-foot former truck assembly plant had been purchased in Springfield, Ohio. The company that employed 200 people in early 2022 now employed over 500. More than 200 of them were Ukrainian refugees and internally displaced persons building armored vehicles for their own country's defense. On February 24, 2026, exactly 4 years after the invasion began, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced 383 additional senators as part of a $2 billion Ukraine commitment. The workshop in Ontario had become a defense industry. February 24, 2022. A phone rings in a factory outside Mississauga. It was not beautiful. It was not revolutionary. Its armor was lighter than a dingo's. Its chassis was borrowed from a commercial pickup truck. It had no combat history. Its factory had never built anything for an active war. And yet it worked. It worked in the forests around Vovchansk where Heart Brigade border guards drove through drone swarms and came back alive. It worked on the Pokrovsk axis where a 3-wheeled Senator finished a medevac run and delivered its passengers alive. It worked when a first-person view drone hit a windscreen and the glass did not break. 200 Ukrainian refugees helped weld it together in Ontario. Over 2,200 of them now ride under it in Donetsk, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Kherson. It was not elegant. It was not the most protected vehicle on the battlefield. It was built on an American truck, welded by Ukrainians, shot at by Russians, and it saved lives every single week. That is not luck. That is what happens when a small workshop answers a phone call and does not stop building.